Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Pecker and I'm the designer of these wedding dresses. Today we will make overbust corset pattern. For this I will use special paper with horizontal and vertical lines. This will make my job easier. I retreat from the cut of the sheet 2 cm and the measurement front length. Let me remind you how we make this measurement. So I measure the distance equal to this measurement and mark the point. The waistline will be drawn through this point. But not now. Now I draw a vertical line along this section of the paper. Then I draw a horizontal line through the previously marked point. This is the waistline. The point of intersection of these two lines I call the letter T. From the point T upwards I mark the length of the back from the waist. I mark point A. After that, I need to measure the armhole depth. From the T point upwards, I mark the depth of the armhole. To do this, from the armhole depth measurement, I subtract 5. I call the resulting point the Russian letter P. You use your alphabet. From point T down the vertical line, I postpone the measurement distance between the waist and hips. The resulting point I call the Russian letter B. You can use, for example, the letter H because there will be a line of the hips. I draw a horizontal line from this point. I repeat again, this is the hip line. From the point on the hips, I measure the width of our pattern. The width of the pattern is half the measurement of the bust line. For example, the measurement of the bust line is 92 centimeters. So this 92 should be divided by 2 and use the resulting 46 centimeters. I call the resulting point Russian B1. From point A, I draw a horizontal line with a length equal to the width of the pattern. I call the resulting point A1. Now I connect point A1 with point Russian B1. From the point Russian P, I draw a horizontal line. This is the armhole depth line. I call the resulting point the Russian letter P1. One more point on the waistline I call T1. The next measurement that I need is the second bust width. It is also called the second front width. Let me remind you how it is measured. From this point to this point, I will explain again. It is first point, and this is the point that I need now. From this point to the second same point. This is the second front width. I divide the front width measurement in half and measure this half from the Russian P1. From point P to the right, I postpone the measurement of the back width divided by 2. I call the resulting points P2 and P3. Now I divide the section of the line P2, P3 in hell but on the drying. The resulting point is called the ruching point P4. Then, from P4, draw a vertical line down to the intersection with the hip line. Now I need the measurement front waist length, from the neck point through the bust point to the waistline. From the point T1 upwards, I postpone the length of the front waist. And I mark point A2. Now I divide the measurement of the neckline by 6. And from point A2 to the left horizontally, I postpone the result of this division. I mark point A3. From the point A2 down, I postpone the measurement of the length from neck to bust. I mark the point with the Russian letter G. From this point to the left horizontally, I postpone half the distance between the points of the bust. I mark a new point with the Russian letters C, G. I connect this point with a line to point A3. Now I need to measure the bust tuck depth. It is measured like this. From the point of the neck in the center of the front, I make a right angle. The first side of the corner is horizontal. And the second side of the corner should rest against the plane of the bust. I need the number on the tape, which is the apex of the corner, and I use this figure. I open the side of the compass to the length of this measurement, for example 10 centimeters, and make an arc from point A3. I measure the length of the line from point A3 to the bust point and make a second arc with a centimeter tape until it intersects with the first arc. This is point A4. Now I connect the A4 point with the bust point with a line. From point T2 down, I postpone the measurement of the length of the corset from the waist to the side. This is point H2. And this is the line of the middle of the back. Along the line of the middle of the back from point T downwards, I measure the length of the corset along the center of the back. This is point H. And this is the line of the middle of the front. Along the line of the middle of the front from the point T1 down, I measure the length of the corset in the center of the front. I get point H1. After that, I connect the H1 point with the H2 point with a line. And I also connect point H2 with point H. This is how I got the corset bottom line. These are the bust points. This is the bust line. And this is the top line of the corset. We need to know or measure the distance from the bust line to the top line. For example, 8 centimeters. I measure this 8 centimeters from the Russian point G to the top. I mark a new point V and draw a horizontal line from this point. I mark point V1. The bust point is marked with the Russian letters CG. Now I press the point of the compass to the point of the bust and draw an arc. The second side of the compass is at point V1. From point P3 I draw a vertical line upward. This line is perpendicular to the horizontal line. Now I measure the distance from point P3 to point P2, for example 8 centimeters. After that, I multiply this 8 centimeters by 0.2. As a result, I get 1.6. Now, from point P3, I draw a B sector with a length of 1.6 centimeters. I mark new point, point P5. My next step is to draw a top line. I'm using an accelerate device. If you don't have such a device, you can simply draw it with your fingers. Now I work with back. Now I draw a line where the loops will be sewn. I made a wide tilt. You can do it a little narrower along the top line. In this drawing, the top line is 8 centimeters. I finished the top line of the corset from point P4. Along the line of loops, the top line of the corset dropped slightly. I need the seam through the bust point to have an aesthetically correct slope. The slope of the top of this seam should be toward the side. I mark a new point on the top line. A new tilt will be modeled from it. Now the second side of the bust dart gives us a slope not to the side, but to the center of the front. And if we don't change anything now, the result will be something like this. But I need another one. Here is such a seam as a result. I draw a line from the bust point to the new point. You can cut along this line. And I will close the side of this dart. Also, you will see that in the process of sewing along the top line, I will cut out another section of the top line. But now I want to show you how it will change. You can make such change immediately or after trying on this corset on mannequin or client's figure. I recommend that you take your time and do it after trying it on. When you have your own experience in working on such products, you yourself decide what stage of work to do this. But as I said, I'm showing you now. Now I measure 1 centimeter to the right and left of the new point and draw new lines from the new points. There will be a common seam along these lines. The next stage of work is a drawing of such inclined seams. The first seam is positioned across the bust point. I mark point T3. Along a ruler, I divide into equal parts the segment from point T3 to point T2. The following seams should be approximately equidistant from each other. I mark the points with the numbers 7 and 7 and 7 backhoe. On the front I draw 3 such seams, and on the back there are 2 more such seams. In order to create a concavity at the waist, a dart must be made in each of these 5 seams and in the side seam. We do not dart into the seam for the loops. It should always be just a line. A dart along this line will give us an unnecessary aesthetic defect. The depth of the dart along the first seam is 3.5 centimeters. The second is 2.5. The third one is 1.5 centimeters. The side seam is 2 centimeters. The next seam on the back has a 1.5 centimeters dart. And one more seam, 2 centimeters. I measure half of 3.5 centimeters to the right and to the left of the T3 point. So, 1.75 right and 1.75 left. I connect the first new point with the bust point with a line. I measure the length of this new line with a ruler. With the same length, I draw a second line from the bust point through the second 1.75 point. This is the second side of the dart. This is how I get a new point. I connect this new point to the first point 1.75. I will mark for you. I want to explain once again how to find a new point. Through the marked point 1.75 stroke, I extend the line. Now I measure the length of the first side of the dart with a ruler. The second side of the dart should be the same length. The new point on the second side of the dart is just below the waist. Now from point T1 down I measure 11 centimeters and draw a horizontal line. This is a reference line. 11 centimeters is a constant. This line crosses the line of the first seam at this point. I connect this point with the point 1.75 with a line. The bottom line of this corset is just above the reference line. If we wanted to make a shorter corset, then the corset bottom line would now be even higher than the reference line. From point 1.75 I measure the lower part of the dart. I measure the same length along the second side of the same part of the dart. To do this, I connect the point below the waist with a line to the point H1 with a stroke. I measure it again. On the second side of the dart, the new point of the corset bottom line also shifts below. I will mark the final working lines a little later, but they will look like this. Like a zigzag. The depth of the dart of the second seam is 2.5 centimeters. To the right and to the left of the point 7, I measure half of 2.5 centimeters. So it is 1.25 centimeters to the right and to the left. I mark the first point 1.25 and the second point 1.25 with a stroke. From the point of the center of the bust, I extend the horizontal line. This is the bust line. From this line, I measure 2 centimeters. This is the top point of the dart. I connect this top point to point 1.25 with a straight line. I measure the resulting line. I lay the same length along the second side of the dart, passing through the point 1.25 with a stroke. Extended the auxiliary horizontal line. From this line up the second seam I measure 1 centimeter. This is the bottom point of the dart. In this situation, the bottom of the dart coincides with the bottom line of the corset. I connect the bottom point of the dart with the straight lines to the points at the waist. And so the bottom half of our dart is done. As with the first seam, measure the side of the dart on the one side of it and postpone the resulting measurement on the other side. Now we can draw another part of the bottom line. After that, we work with the third seam in the same way as with the first and second seams. The depth of the dart for the third seam is 1.5 centimeters. Right and left have the depth of the dart. The top point of the dart along the third seam is 2 centimeters lower than along the second seam. We work with the third seam in the same way as with the first and second seams. The bottom point of the dart is 1 cm higher than the second seam. We work with the third seam in the same way as with the first and second seams. Like a zigzag. The depth of the dart of the second seam is 2.5 centimeters. To the right and to the left of the point 7, I measure half of 2.5 centimeters. So it is 1.25 centimeters to the right and to the left. I mark out the contours of detail number 1. To make it clear for you, I completely painted pink, and detail number 2 is colored green. This is the bottom line like a zigzag. This is detail number 4, and this is the side line. Details number 5, 6, 7, 8 are all back details. Now I draw darts along these lines in the same way as darts along the front. I measure a half of the depth to the right and to the left. Mark these points. Draw the first side of the dart. At this point, the top line of the corset intersects with the line at which I draw the dart. This point is the top of the dart. I mark this point 1.5 with a stroke. I draw the second side of the dart of arbitrary length. Now I measure the length of the first side of the dart. I postpone the same length of the second side of the dart. I mark this point 1.5 with 2 strokes. Now I draw the bottom of this dart. This is the bottom point of this dart. I connect this point with dart waist point. I measure this side of the dart and I draw the same length line of the second side of this dart. And the bottom line is the same as the zigzag. I make the outlines of the details easier to understand for you. Now I'm working on the last dart. The depth of the dart is 2 centimeters. All steps are the same as with a previous dart. Therefore, I no longer comment. Just watch. Now I calculate the difference along the hip line. It is equal to half the bust measurement minus half the hips measurement. For example, the bust measurement is 92 centimeters. So half of 92 centimeters is 46. Measurement of hips is 96, so half of 96 is 48. Now I subtract 48 from 46, and the result is minus 2. I put half of the result to the right and to the left along the line of the hips from the side line. It is 1 centimeter. I mark points with Russian letters B3 and B4. After that, along the waistline from the side line, I mark half the depth of the waist dart of the side. The depth of this dart is 2 centimeters. So, to the right and to the left of the side line, I measure 1 centimeter. I connect these new points on the waist with intersecting lines on the points on the hips, like this. We draw the intersection because we have minus 2. If there were no minus, then we would connect with vertical lines. Now I make out the upper part of the side dart. Here is the top point of the side dart. My work almost finished, but along these lines under the bust I want to make an additional extension. In the finished product, this extension will be right here on the line under the bust. From the bust point down to the desired level, I take the measurement. For example, it is 10 centimeters. So, from the bust line to the underbust line 10 centimeters. I measure out this 10 centimeters and mark the point. Now I also mark 10 centimeters on one side of the dart. I draw an auxiliary line through these 2 points. Along this line to the right and to the left of the first point, I measure 1.5 centimeters. For this point, I draw new side of the dart. I will cut the details along these lines. I made this top line like this corset top line, but if you need a sweetheart neckline, you need to do the step like this. The tip of the heart is now 2 centimeters below the bust line, and our work is finished. In the next master classes, I will sew corset according to this pattern. Hello and welcome! I'm Helen Pecker and I'm the designer of these wedding dresses. Today I want to show you how to measure the depth of the neckline. We have 2 ways to do this. The first way, We measure from this point of the neck down to the point we need. And the second way, we focus on the bust line. How much above or below the bust line is the depth point of the neckline? Let me explain again. These are the bust points, and this is the bust line. We ask the client to point with her fingers to what point she wants the depth of the cut. And from the bust line to her finger we take a measurement. That's all.